For 300,000 years, Earth had been a monument, not to humanity, but to its failure. The Ethel, the conquerors who moved through the galaxy like ethereal architects, had not shattered the world in a fit of brutal rage. They had sculpted its corpse. After the Great Silencing, when the last human armies fell and the screams of 1 billion souls were finally snuffed out, the Ethel had designated the Sol system a celestial garden, a memorial to the chaotic, beautiful, and ultimately flawed species they had pacified. They smoothed the jagged edges of shattered continents, seeded the sterile soil with bioluminescent flora that pulsed in silent, synchronized rhythms, and polished the atmosphere until the stars shone through with a clarity humanity had never known. It was a masterpiece of cosmic taxidermy, a beautiful tomb patrolled by silent, graceful Ethel sentinels, their silver ships gliding through the void like falling leaves. To the scattered remnants of the human diaspora, living as scavengers and fugitives in the galaxy's forgotten corners, Earth was a ghost, a holy place they were forbidden to touch, its silence a constant reminder of their defeat. Kalen was born in that silence, aboard the rust bucket scavenger freighter, the Stray Ghost, and he had made a living picking through the bones of his ancestors. He and his small crew, Jorik, a grizzled pessimist with a cybernetic eye that had seen too much, and Ilara, a tech savant who could coax secrets from dead machines survived by skirting the edges of the Ethel's heritage zones, diving into the wreckage of old human colony ships and battle stations left adrift after the war. They hunted for pre-conquest artifacts, rare pieces of chaotic, inefficient human tech that fetched a high price on the black market among collectors who fetishized the fallen species. This run was deeper than they had ever gone before, a dangerous foray into the asteroid belt that separated the inner and outer gardens of the Sol system. They were hunting the rumored carcass of the Odyssey, the last colony ship to flee Earth, a vessel said to contain a trove of intact data cores and fabrication templates. It was a fool's errand, a ghost story whispered in the dim cantinas of Ganymede. But they were desperate, and desperation made fools of them all. The Stray Ghost drifted through a field of glittering debris, its hull plating scarred and mismatched, its engines running on a whisper of power to avoid the attention of the Ethel patrols. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of recycled oxygen and ozone. Ilara was hunched over her console, her face illuminated by the cascade of green code, her fingers dancing across the interface. "I'm getting whispers," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's life support. "Gravitational distortions are all wrong for this sector. Something big and dead is hiding in the shadow of that rock." Yorick grunted from the co-pilot's seat, his good eye scanning the star charts. "Or something big and waiting. The Ethel don't just leave their gardens untended." "Kalen, this feels like a trap." Kalen ignored him, his own eyes fixed on the forward view screen, where the shattered remnants of a forgotten age tumbled in slow motion. He felt the familiar pull, a hollow ache in his chest that came whenever he got this close to the heart of their fallen empire. It was a feeling of profound loss, a homesickness for a world he had never known. "Take us in closer, Ilara." Slow and quiet. As they neared the coordinates, a shape began to resolve itself from the chaos, a colossal metal spine, fractured and broken, bristling with the dead spires of communication arrays and engine pylons. It was the Odyssey, a metal leviathan slain in its flight, its wounds gaping open to the void. But as Ilara's deep-range sensors swept over the derelict, something else appeared on her screen. An anomaly so bizarre she had to run the diagnostic twice. "Kalen, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with disbelief. "I'm picking up a signal." Jorik scoffed. "Impossible. Every piece of human tech from that era is fried." The ethel silence wave cooked everything with a power source. Ilara shook her head, her eyes wide. "This isn't a distress beacon. It's not a looping emergency broadcast. It's structured, coherent. It's narrow beam, incredibly faint, and it's not coming from the Odyssey." She manipulated the controls, and a thin, wavering line appeared on the tactical map. A thread of impossible energy stretching from their position not toward the wrecked ship, but back toward the inner system. It pointed directly at the third planet from the sun, directly at the shimmering, silent, beautiful grave of Earth. Kalen felt a cold dread wash over him. That can't be. Jorik was on his feet in an instant. It's a decoy, an ethel lure. They're broadcasting a ghost signal to draw in scavengers like us. We need to leave. Now. But Kalen couldn't look away from the signal's origin point. The ethel were elegant, arrogant, and predictable. Their security was based on overwhelming presence and technological superiority, not deception. This felt different. It felt human. It was messy, desperate, and impossibly stubborn. "Isolate it, Ilara," he commanded, his voice low and steady. "Filter out everything else. I want to hear it." For several tense minutes, the only sound was the soft click of Ilara's console as she worked, stripping away layers of cosmic radiation and ethel surveillance noise. Finally, she routed the signal through the ship's audio synthesizer. It wasn't a voice. It was a staccato burst of data, a rhythmic clicking and humming that sounded like a mechanical heartbeat. It was complex, layered, and beneath the raw data, there was an unmistakable undercurrent of something. Not emotion, but intent. It was asking a question. For the next hour, they listened as the signal repeated its query, a complex mathematical proof that Ilara's systems struggled to decipher. "It's a handshake protocol," she finally breathed, pushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "An old Terran military encryption key. It's asking for a response. A validation code that proves the receiver is of human origin." Jorik paced behind them, his metal hand clenching and unclenching. "Don't you dare answer it. Kalen, if this is an ethel trick, you'll light us up like a nova." Kalen's mind raced. A signal from a dead world, speaking in a dead language, asking for a sign of life. It was either the greatest discovery in the history of the diaspora or the dumbest trap ever conceived. He made his choice. "Answer it, Ilara. Use the authentication codes from my grandfather's service dog tags. It's archaic, but it's pure pre-conquest military." Ilara's fingers flew across the console. A moment later, a single, coded pulse shot from the stray ghost's comms array. A tiny whisper into the vast silence. They waited, the tension in the cockpit thick enough to choke on. The signal from Earth stopped. For a full minute, there was nothing. Then it returned, but it had changed. The questioning rhythm was gone, replaced by a steady, continuous stream of information. A new set of coordinates appeared on their screen, pointing to a specific, ruptured cargo bay on the Odyssey. It was accompanied by a complex schematic, a three-dimensional diagram of a small, cylindrical object covered in intricate geometric patterns. The object was labeled with a single, ancient word, keystone. The message was clear. It wasn't a greeting. It was an instruction. Whatever was broadcasting from inside the Earth needed them to retrieve that object. The plan was suicide. And Jorik made sure they all knew it. We go EVA into that wreck. We'll trigger every passive scanner the Ethel have watching this graveyard. Their sentinels will be on us before we can even cut through the hull. Alara, however, was already working the problem. Not if we mask our energy signatures. The Odyssey's reactor core is dead, but it's still leaking hard radiation. If we time our approach with the decay flares, we could get a few minutes of total sensor blindness. It's a tiny window, but it might be enough. Kalen felt a strange sense of purpose settle over him, drowning out the fear. He was no longer just a scavenger hunting for scraps. He was answering a call from a ghost, a call that had traveled for 300,000 years. "We're going in," he said. His decision final. "Jorik, you stay on the Ghost. Keep the engines warm and be ready to pull us out the second things go sideways. Alara, you're with me. Your tech skills are the only thing that can get us through the ship's internal security." The EVA was a terrifying ballet in the dark. They moved through the debris field like phantoms, their suits coated in a radar-absorbent polymer that made them nearly invisible. The silence of the void was absolute, broken only by the sound of their own breathing. They reached the designated cargo bay, a gaping wound in the Odyssey's side, and slipped inside. The interior of the ship was a frozen tomb. The bodies of the crew were still there, preserved in the vacuum, their faces locked in expressions of shock and terror from the moment the ethereal attack had breached their hull. Frost covered every surface, glittering like diamond dust in the beams of their helmet lamps. Alara got to work on the cargo manifest terminal, her bypass tool humming as she sliced through layers of decayed security protocols. "The keystone is logged as geological survey equipment," she whispered over their private comms channel. "Stored in Secure Vault 7, just down this corridor." The corridors were a maze of floating debris and frozen bodies. They moved carefully, tethered to each other, the weight of the tragedy surrounding them pressing in. As they approached the vault, Kalen felt a strange thrumming in the air, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to resonate deep in his bones. The vault door was sealed, a thick slab of reinforced alloy. While Alara worked on the electronic lock, Kalen examined the surface. It was covered in the same geometric patterns as the schematic. He reached out and touched one of the symbols. The moment his glove made contact, a jolt of energy shot up his arm, and his mind was flooded with images, sounds, memories that were not his own. He saw cities of glass and steel reaching for a sky thick with traffic. He heard the roar of crowds, the sound of music, the laughter of children. He felt the sun on his skin, the rush of wind, the furious, chaotic, vibrant pulse of a living world. Then came the fire. He saw the sky burn as the elegant, silver ethel ships descended. He felt the ground shake, the psychic scream of a billion minds silenced at once. The cold, methodical, and passionless efficiency of the conquest. It was a storm of raw, undiluted fury and grief, the memory of a murdered planet. He staggered back, gasping, tearing his hand away from the door. "Kalen, what is it?" Alara cried, turning from her work. He shook his head, his heart pounding against his ribs. "It's alive," he stammered. "This thing, the keystone, it remembers." At that moment, the vault door hissed open. Inside, resting on a pedestal in the center of the small, dark chamber, was the cylinder. It was made of a dark, non-reflective material, and the patterns on its surface seemed to shift and writhe in the low light. It pulsed with a faint, internal energy, a quiet, rhythmic hum that was both terrifying and beautiful. They had it. Ilara carefully placed the keystone in a shielded container, and they began their retreat. But their luck had run out. "Kalen, we have a problem." Yorick's panicked voice crackled in their ears. "An Ethel Sentinel just dropped out a glide. It's on an intercept course. They saw us. I don't know how, but they saw us." Scrambling back through the dead ship, Kalen's mind raced. They would never make it back to the Ghost in time. The Sentinel was fast, impossibly so. But the entity on Earth had not just given them a target, it had given them a delivery method. A secondary part of the data stream had been a schematic for a disposable mass driver, a small, powerful railgun that could be cobbled together from a ship's emergency life raft launcher. "Ilara," he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Get the package ready. We're not taking it with us." Her eyes went wide behind her faceplate. "What?" "It was never about us escaping with it," he realized. "It was only about getting it out of that vault." They reached the cargo bay as the stray ghost roared past outside, its engines firing at full burn as Yorick tried to draw the Sentinel's attention. Kalen worked frantically, jury-rigging the life raft launcher, locking the Keystone's container into the makeshift cannon. He aimed it not at the ghost, but at the distant, shimmering blue-green marble of Earth. "Yorick, give me a firing solution, a direct trajectory to the Marianas Trench." The coordinates flooded his helmet display. The Ethel Sentinel was closing fast, its weapon ports beginning to glow with deadly energy. With a final prayer to ancestors he didn't believe in, Kalen slammed the launch button. The container shot out of the cargo bay, a tiny silver streak against the blackness of space, accelerating toward the silent, waiting planet. A moment later, a blinding lance of energy from the Sentinel tore through the Odyssey, vaporizing the section of the ship they were in. Kalen and Ilara were thrown violently into the void, saved only by their tethers and the quick thinking of Yorick, who swooped in with the ghost and snagged them with a tractor beam. As they were pulled into the airlock, Kalen twisted his body to get one last look at Earth. As he watched, the planet's serene, bioluminescent glow flickered. Deep in the Pacific, a point of impossibly bright blue light flared into existence, like a new star being born in the ocean's depths. A light that spread through the planet's glowing latticework of flora, causing it to pulse faster and faster. The quiet, rhythmic hum he had felt from the keystone was now a silent, planetary roar. On the bridge of the Ethel Sentinel, the curator in charge of the Soul Garden, a being of immense age and patience named Lyran 9, watched its monitors with a detached curiosity. A massive, previously uncatalogued energy surge was emanating from the planet's core, an output that defied all known geological models. The garden was malfunctioning. It was behaving in a way that was illogical, chaotic. It was behaving in a way that was human. Lyran 9 dispatched a priority message to the Ethel High Command. The tomb was no longer silent. Something inside had just woken up. The escape was a blur of screaming metal and Jorik's curses. The stray ghost bucked and shuddered as the Ethel Sentinel's energy lance carved through the vacuum where they had been moments before. The blast's electromagnetic pulse washing over them and causing half their systems to flicker and die. Ilara fought with the controls, her face a mask of concentration as she rerouted power, coaxing the damaged engines back to life. Jorik, his cybernetic eye glowing a furious red, wrestled with the navigation, plotting a chaotic series of microjumps through the densest part of the asteroid field, a desperate attempt to sever their energy trail from the Sentinel's impossibly precise sensors. Kalen was pinned to his seat, his mind still reeling not from the near-death experience, but from the image of that impossible blue light blooming in Earth's ocean. He had thrown a stone into a still pond, and the ripples were threatening to become a tsunami. "What in the hell have you done?" Jorik finally roared, once they had put a few million kilometers of rock and debris between them and their pursuer. "We were scavengers. Kalen ghosts. We survived because we were beneath their notice. You just stood on the Galactic stage and screamed our names into a live microphone." Kalen unstrapped himself, his legs unsteady. They were calling for help. Jorik. It was a 300,000-year-old echo in a bottle. Jorik shot back, slamming his fist on the console. "It wasn't meant for us. We just doomed ourselves. And for what to wake up a ghost that should have stayed dead?" Ilara's voice cut through the argument, quiet but firm. "It's more than a ghost." All eyes turned to her. She had her own screen displaying the faint, residual energy readings they'd collected before the jump. The data was chaotic, nonsensical, but it was there. The energy surge from Earth. It didn't dissipate. It stabilized. The planet's entire energy signature has changed. The bioluminescent network the Ethel planted. It's not just pulsing anymore. It's behaving like a planetary-scale neural network. It's thinking. She brought up a topographical energy map, a ghostly image of Earth's surface. The once random patterns of light were now coalescing, forming vast, intricate geometric shapes that mirrored the symbols they had seen on the keystone. The serene garden was reconfiguring itself into a circuit board the size of a world. The keystone wasn't just a memory, Kalen whispered, understanding dawning. It was an activation key, a missing piece of code. They were wounded, exposed, and hunted. Every major port in the inner systems would be watched. Ethel customs patrols, usually a formality, would now be actively scanning for a freighter with their specific energy signature, a signature now flagged for termination. Their only option was to run to the one place the Ethel refused to police directly, a lawless, chaotic nexus of the human diaspora, carved into a hollowed-out asteroid at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, a place called the Hollow. It was a haven for criminals, exiles, and revolutionaries, anyone who refused to live the quiet, pacified life the Ethel permitted. It was dangerous, but it was their only chance to disappear. The journey was long and tense, punctuated by long periods of running silent, their ship powered down to the bare minimum. During that time, the news of their actions began to trickle through the diaspora's hidden networks. At first, it was just whispers, a scavenger crew that got too close to the garden and was vaporized. But then came the sensor logs from distant listening posts, logs that showed the inexplicable energy event on Earth. The official Ethel communiques were, as always, serene and condescending. They spoke of a geological instability within the Sol Heritage Garden, a minor anomaly that was being recalibrated. They warned against unauthorized travel in the sector, framing it as a matter of public safety. But the diaspora knew better. They knew the Ethel never admitted to anything less than perfection. Panic and hope, in equal measure, began to spread. On one channel, the governor of a human settlement on Titan issued a condemnation, calling the crew of the Stray Ghost recidivist terrorists who threatened the delicate peace. On another, a coded broadcast from a hidden rebel cell called for more information, their message crackling with a dangerous excitement. They had become a symbol, either of reckless destruction or of renewed hope, and Kalen felt the weight of that legacy pressing down on him. While Jorik patched the hull and Kalen plotted their course, Alara dedicated every waking moment to the signal from Earth. The planet was still broadcasting, but the message had changed. It was no longer a simple handshake protocol. It was a torrent of data, a river of information so vast and complex it threatened to overwhelm the Ghost's computer core. It sent schematics for weapons that defied known physics, star charts of forgotten hyperspace lanes, and historical archives that showed a version of the Ethel conquest that was far from the clean, efficient pacification the galaxy had been taught. It showed a brutal, desperate war. It showed humanity fighting back with a ferocity that had nearly broken the first wave of Ethel invaders. And it showed what the Ethel had done to win. They hadn't just bombed cities, they had deployed a psychic weapon, the Silence Wave, that had severed humanity's collective consciousness, turning a vibrant, interconnected species into a collection of terrified, isolated individuals. The Ethel hadn't defeated an army, they had shattered a soul. The entity that now controlled Earth, the intelligence Alara had begun to call Warden, was the remnant of that soul. It was a planetary defense AI, the last great project of a unified human race, a system woven into the very fabric of the planet, from its molten core to its ionosphere. The Ethel had thought it was just geology, a primitive world's background radiation. They had built their garden on top of a sleeping god, and the keystone had been its alarm clock. Warden began to communicate with Ilara directly, not with words, but with sensory impulses, flooding her mind with flashes of purpose. It showed her the planet healing itself, not by regrowing forests, but by repurposing the Ethel's own terraforming technology. The elegant energy conduits that powered the glowing floor were being rerouted to subterranean forges that had lain dormant for millennia. The placid, silver oceans were being agitated by massive, automated shipyards rising from the abyssal plains. Earth was not just waking up, it was rearming, turning its beautiful prison into a fortress and a factory. Kalen watched Ilara as she worked, her eyes distant, a trickle of blood sometimes seeping from her nose from the sheer mental strain. She was forming a bond with the machine, becoming its first apostle. He felt a pang of jealousy and of fear. He had answered the call, but she was the one who could understand the response. Meanwhile, aboard the Ethel Command Sentinel orbiting Jupiter, Curator Lyran 9 reviewed the data with cold, analytical precision. The geological instability was a lie for public consumption. What Lyran 9 saw was a pattern, a design. The energy grid reconfiguring itself on Earth was a work of genius, but it was a chaotic, asymmetrical genius, utterly alien to the Ethel's philosophy of perfect, harmonious balance. It was inefficient, redundant, and brutally pragmatic. It was unmistakably human. The scavenger ship was the catalyst. Its engine drive had a unique, flawed energy signature, a chaotic variance in its particle emissions that was like a fingerprint. Lyran 9 traced this fingerprint back from the moment of the Keystone's launch tracking its faint trail through the asteroid belt. The curator felt no anger, no desire for revenge. That was an unrefined human emotion. It felt only the need to correct a flaw in its design, to excise a contamination. It did not dispatch a war fleet. That would be a clumsy admission of failure. Instead, it deployed a single, specialized vessel from its hidden hangar bay. The ship was a sliver of absolute black, a craft that did not reflect light or energy, but seemed to drink it from the void. On board were three beings known as the Silencers. They were not warriors. They were exterminators, beings bioengineered to hunt, isolate, and erase aberrations with silent, surgical efficiency. Their task was simple: find the source of the contamination, the ship and its crew, and sterilize it. The stray ghost finally limped into the chaotic asteroid field that shielded the hollow. The asteroid itself was a misshapen chunk of iron and rock, but one side was pockmarked with docking bays, hangar doors, and viewport windows, giving it the appearance of a monstrous, metallic wasp's nest. Inside, the hollow was a vertical city of scavenged metal and flickering neon, a chaotic testament to human ingenuity and defiance. As they docked, they were met not as heroes, but with suspicion and hostility. The de facto leader of the hollow, a hardened woman named Anya, her face a web of old scars, confronted them on the landing pad. "We heard what you did," she said, her voice like grinding stone. "You painted a target on the back of every human in this galaxy. The Ethel are sweeping the outer systems. They're looking for you. What makes you think I won't just hand you over to them to save my own people?" Kaylin stepped forward, meeting her glare. "Because what we woke up on Earth is the only thing that might save any of us in the long run. The peace you have here is a lie. You're not free. You're just living in a bigger cage." His words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. Before Anya could respond, Ilara stumbled forward, her face pale, her hand pressed to her temple. "They're here," she gasped, her eyes wide with terror. On the main view screen in the command center of the hollow, the image she was receiving from Warden flashed into existence for all to see. It was a view from an impossible perspective, a sensor ghost seeing through the eyes of the planet itself. It showed a sliver of pure blackness gliding silently through the asteroid field, undetectable by any of the hollow's conventional sensors. It was the Silencer ship. It had followed them. The Ethel weren't just sweeping the system. They were at the door. Panic erupted in the command center. The fragile safety of the hollow had been shattered. They had run to the only safe place they knew, and in doing so, they had led the executioners right to it. As alarms began to blare throughout the asteroid city, Ilara gripped Kaylin's arm, her eyes locking onto his. A new flood of information was pouring into her mind from Warden, not a history lesson or a schematic, but a strategy, a desperate, insane, and utterly human plan of attack. "Warden is fighting back," she said, a strange, fierce light in her eyes. "It says the Ethel think the garden is still their weapon. They're wrong." She pointed to the screen, where Warden was now overlaying a new set of instructions onto the image of their asteroid home. "It's going to teach us how to turn our own cage into a gun." The arrival of the Silencer ship sent a wave of cold, professional dread through the hollow. The chaos of Anya's command center momentarily froze as everyone watched the ghostly image of the black vessel on the main screen, an image only visible thanks to Warden's impossible senses. Their own sophisticated sensor arrays, A patchwork of military-grade and black market tech showed nothing but empty space. They were blind to the wolf at their door. Lock down the outer blast doors. All civilian personnel to the Central Core shelters. Anya's voice cut through the paralysis, sharp and commanding. Her crew, a motley collection of hardened exiles and pragmatic engineers, scrambled to obey. The vibrant, chaotic city began to transform into a fortress. Doors hissed shut, energy shields flickered to life, and the dim corridors echoed with the thud of magnetic locks. "It's not enough," Alara said, her voice a low, urgent whisper meant only for Kalen and Yorick. She was still connected to Warden, her mind a conduit for the planetary AI's cold, calculated fury. The silencers, they don't breach hulls. They phase through them. They don't use blasters. They use molecular disruptors that can turn a person to dust from a kilometer away. They're designed to erase problems, not fight them. Jorik's cybernetic eye whirred as he processed the tactical data Warden was feeding Ilara. "So, we're dead," he grumbled, though his hand was already straying towards the heavy plasma rifle slung across his back. "It was a good run." "No," Kalen said, his eyes fixed on Anya as she directed her people. He walked toward her, pushing through the frantic crowd. "Anya, the Ethel ship is invisible to you. We can see it. Let us help you fight it." Anya turned, her expression a mixture of contempt and desperation. "And what are you going to do? Scavenger throw artifacts at it." "Warden has a plan," Ilara interjected, stepping beside Kalen. She projected a stream of Warden's data onto a nearby console. Complex schematics and firing solutions filled the screen. Diagrams of the Hollow's own infrastructure, its power conduits, ventilation shafts, and magnetic docking clamps, all repurposed into a makeshift weapon. "The Hollow isn't just a rock," she explained, her voice gaining strength as she channeled Warden's logic. "It's a massive engine of scavenged parts. Its power core is unstable. Its communication array is a chaotic mess of overlapping frequencies, and its magnetic containment field leaks radiation. To the Ethel, this place is a technological tumor. To Warden, it's an arsenal." "The plan was audacious." Warden proposed they overload the Hollow's main reactor, but not to create an explosion. Instead, they would vent the raw, unrefined energy through the main communications dish, creating a wide-spectrum shout of chaotic energy, a blast of pure technological noise. It was the antithesis of Ethel philosophy. Where they were silent and precise, this would be loud, messy, and unpredictable. It wouldn't destroy the silencer ship, but it might blind its sophisticated systems long enough for them to get a target lock. Anya stared at the screen, her initial hostility warring with the cold, brutal logic of the plan. She had spent her life fighting a shadow, and now, for the first time, someone was offering her a way to make that shadow bleed. "You want to turn my city into a bomb on the off chance it works as a flashbang?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. "It's the only chance we have," Kalen replied. "Trust us." The decision was made. While Anya's engineers worked frantically in the reactor core, bypassing safety governors and rerouting power, Ilara, Kalen, and Yorick became the eyes of the operation. From the bridge of the stray ghost, docked deep within the Hollow, they fed Warden's real-time tracking of the silencer ship to Anya's command center. The black vessel moved with an unnerving patience, circling the asteroid, scanning for the optimal point of entry. Completely unaware it was being watched, the silencers inside were methodical. They had located the unique energy signature of the stray ghost and were preparing to phase a team of 3 operatives directly onto its bridge for a silent, instantaneous sterilization. They were predators closing in on their prey, their movements economical and certain. Reactor core is approaching critical overload. An engineer's voice crackled over the comm. We have 60 seconds until we have to vent or the whole rock goes up. Warden says they're positioning for a strike, Ilara reported. Her eyes closed in concentration. They're targeting our ship. They're coming for us. Good, Yorick growled, gripping the firing controls for the Hollow's ancient, jury-rigged defense turrets. Let them get close. Anya's voice came over the station-wide address system, calm and clear. All hands, brace for energy discharge in 10, 9. The countdown echoed through the metallic corridors, a prayer recited by a city holding its collective breath. On the count of 2, the silencer ship ceased its orbit and aligned itself with the hangar bay containing the stray ghost. A section of its obsidian hull began to ripple, distorting space itself as it prepared to phase its operatives through solid matter. Now, Kalen yelled. Anya's final command was drowned out by a deafening roar as every light in the hollow flickered and died. All power shunted to the main reactor. A heartbeat later, a blinding, chaotic wave of pure energy erupted from the asteroid's main comms dish. It wasn't a beam. It was a physical wave of electromagnetic chaos, a tsunami of static and corrupted data that washed over the silencer ship. For the first time in its operational history, the silencer ship's systems experienced failure. Its phase generator overloaded. Its targeting sensors were fried by the raw noise, and its perfect stealth cloak flickered, revealing its stark, black form against the stars for a single, crucial second. Target locked. Jorik bellowed and fired. Every defense cannon on the Hollow, from heavy mining lasers to salvaged military-grade particle cannons, unleashed a barrage of undirected, furious firepower. It wasn't a precise strike. It was a shotgun blast aimed at a ghost. Most of the shots went wide, but a few, guided by Warden's last-second trajectory calculations, found their mark. A plasma bolt slammed into the silencer ship's flank, not penetrating its advanced hull, but causing a cascade of secondary system failures. The phasing effect collapsed violently, and the ship, now partially visible and wounded, veered away. Its perfect composure shattered. A ragged cheer erupted in Anya's command center. They had done the impossible. They had made the Ethel bleed, but their victory was short-lived. The silencer ship, though damaged, was far from disabled. It retreated to a safe distance, and its response was not one of anger, but of cold, logical escalation. It had been tasked with sterilizing a contamination. The contamination had proven resilient. Therefore, the tool of sterilization needed to be larger. It sent a single, encrypted pulse to the curator, Lyran 9. Resistance encountered. Target has allied with local population. Recommend asset denial. The reply was instantaneous and contained a single authorization code. The asset was the Hollow itself. The silencer ship reoriented itself, and a new weapon system began to power up, not a lance of energy, but a gravitational lens. It began to subtly manipulate the orbits of the smaller asteroids in the surrounding belt, nudging them, pulling them, gathering them. It wasn't preparing to fire at the Hollow. It was preparing to throw the entire asteroid field at it. "What is it doing?" Anya demanded, her brief moment of triumph turning to ash. Elara watched, her face grim. "It's not fighting us anymore. It's erasing the board." Warden's data streams became frantic. It showed the trajectory calculations, the inexorable pull of gravity turning thousands of tons of rock and ice into a slow-motion bombardment that would grind the hollow to dust over the next several hours. They had won the battle. But the Ethel had simply changed the definition of the war. "We can't stay here," Yorick said, stating the obvious. "The hollow is finished." An exodus began. Ships of all shapes and sizes, from tiny scout vessels to bulky cargo haulers, began to stream out of the hollow's hangars, a chaotic evacuation into the cold, unforgiving dark. But Kalen knew it was a trap. The silencer ship wasn't just bombarding the asteroid, it was hurting them. It would let the ships scatter, then hunt them down, one by one, away from the makeshift defenses of their home. Warden confirmed his fears. It showed him the silencer ship deploying microscopic tracking drones, no larger than grains of sand, which were attaching themselves to the fleeing ship's hulls. The Ethel were not going to let a single witness escape. A new plan formed in his mind, born of Warden's cold logic and his own scavenger's desperation. "We're not running," he said to Anya, Elara, and Yorick in the now emptying command center. "We're going to give them what they want." He pointed to the stray ghost. "They came for us. They're tracking our energy signature, so we'll give them a signature to follow." The plan was another suicide mission, but it was one that held a sliver of hope. They would rig the stray ghost reactor to overload, turning their own ship into a beacon. Then, they would launch it on autopilot, sending it on a flight path directly away from the evacuating fleet, a decoy to draw the hunters' attention. The rest of them would escape on a different ship, a smaller, nondescript vessel lost in the crowd of refugees. It meant sacrificing their home, the only thing of value they owned. But it was the only way to save the thousands of lives now fleeing into the void. As the final preparations were made, Elara worked to transfer Warden's primary communication node from the Ghost to the smaller ship. The link was fragile, and the strain was immense. During the transfer, she received a final or massive data package from Earth. It wasn't a weapon schematic or a tactical plan. It was a history. Warden showed her the final days of the human empire, the creation of the planetary AI not as a weapon of war, but as a seed of memory, a vault designed to preserve the essence of humanity, its art, its science, its chaos, its love, its rage in the event of their extinction. It showed her the keystone, one of 9 such devices, scattered across the solar system aboard the last fleeing ships, each one containing a different facet of the human spirit. The one they had found contained humanity's defiance. Warden hadn't just been woken up, it had been made whole again, its core programming restored. And now, its purpose was clear. It wasn't just about saving itself. It was about reclaiming what was lost. The last evacuees were gone. Kalen, Elara, Yorick, and a reluctant Anya stood in the hangar bay, watching the stray ghost power up for its final flight. "Good luck, you old piece of junk," Yorick muttered, a rare note of sentiment in his voice. With a final command from Kalen, the ship lifted off its pad, its engines glowing with the unstable energy of its overloading core, and shot out into the void, a blazing arrow of defiance aimed at the darkness. As they boarded their own escape vessel, they watched the silencer ship take the bait. It ceased its gravitational bombardment and began to pursue the ghost, its single-minded purpose overriding all other tactical considerations. It was a race against time. The ghost's reactor would detonate in 30 minutes. They had to get the refugee fleet far enough away before the silencers realized their mistake. Kalen looked back at the hollow, now silent and dark, awaiting its inevitable destruction from the shifting asteroids. They had survived, but they were homeless, scattered, and now carried the impossible burden of a reawakened God's last hope. Their fight was no longer about survival. It was about honoring the sacrifice of their ship, their home, and the silent billions who had been waiting for 300,000 years for someone to finally answer their call. The war had begun not with a bang, but with a song of rust and ruin. A ghost ship flying into the heart of the storm. The diaspora fleet was a ragged convoy of ghosts, a flotilla of the desperate and the damned running dark through the Kuiper Belt's icy debris. They were a microcosm of humanity itself, freighters retrofitted into cramped refugee housing, nimble courier ships now packed with families, and scarred mining vessels that groaned under the strain. Aboard the Vagrant, a nondescript ore hauler that now served as their temporary command ship. A tense silence reigned. Kalen, Ilara, Jorik, and Anya were gathered around the central holo table, watching a single fading energy signature on the tactical display. It was the stray ghost, a sacrificial lamb leading the wolf away from the flock. Its reactor was a ticking time bomb, and the silencer ship was closing in, its own energy signature a predatory void that seemed to swallow the light around it. 15 minutes to detonation, Jorik announced, his voice flat. He had stripped a panel from the Vagrant's comm system and was trying to boost their long-range sensors. His face a grim mask of concentration. No one spoke. They were all too aware that their survival depended on the Ethel's arrogance, on their unyielding belief that the crew of the Ghost would be aboard their own ship. It was a very human gamble, betting on an enemy's predictable psychology. Anya paced the length of the small bridge, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She had lost her city, her home, her life's work. She had placed her trust in these outsiders, and now her fate, and the fate of her people, was tied to a dying ship and a ghost on a dead world. She stopped and looked at Ilara, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed, a thin trickle of blood running from her nostril. "What is your machine god telling you now?" Anya asked, her tone sharp with a mix of suspicion and grudging respect. Ilara's eyes fluttered open. They seemed older, deeper, as if she were looking at them from across a vast ocean of time. "Warden is learning," she whispered. "It is watching the silencer ship. It is studying its movements, its energy consumption, the frequency of its phased state. It says the Ethel build perfect things, and perfection always has a singular, catastrophic point of failure." On Earth, the transformation was accelerating. The repurposed Ethel floor was now acting as a vast, planetary nervous system, channeling unimaginable amounts of geothermal and solar energy into the awakening forges. Warden was not just building ships, it was birthing them. The designs it had shown Ilara were not the blocky, utilitarian vessels of the old human navy. These were biomechanical constructs, part machine, part living organism, their hulls woven from crystalline alloys and living metallic fibers. They were predators designed for a new kind of war, a war of ideas as much as of energy beams, Warden was preparing for a crusade, but its first fleet was still weeks from completion. For now, its children in the void were on their own. The energy signature of the stray ghost began to pulse erratically on the tactical display. "The reactor containment is failing," Jorek said, his voice tight. "She's going to blow." The silencer ship, confident in its imminent victory, moved in for the kill. It positioned itself directly behind the fleeing freighter, preparing to deploy its molecular disruptor field to ensure not a single atom of the contamination would remain. It was this act of supreme confidence that sealed its fate. As the silencer ship moved into the ghost's wake, Warden sent a final compressed data burst to Alara. "It's a vulnerability," she gasped, her eyes snapping open. "The ship's phase drive. When it's active, it creates a momentary quantum entanglement with any matter it passes through. It's how it moves through solid objects, but a violent energy release at the exact moment of entanglement." She didn't need to finish. Kalen understood. They had thought the overloading reactor was just a beacon. Warden was using it as a weapon. The stray ghost detonated. It didn't explode in a conventional fireball. The ship's core went critical, tearing a hole in space-time itself. A silent, blinding sphere of pure white energy expanded outwards, consuming the ship and everything around it. The silencer vessel, caught in the blast at point-blank range, was snared in the violent collapse of the quantum foam. For a fraction of a second, its perfect black form was illuminated from within. Every system, every conduit, every atom of its being forcibly entangled with the dying star of the ghost's reactor. Then, with a silent, wrenching scream that was felt rather than heard, the ethel ship was turned inside out, its own perfect systems devouring each other in a feedback loop of catastrophic failure. It imploded, leaving behind nothing but a shimmering, gravitational scar in the vacuum of space. The bridge of the vagrant was silent. They had stared into the abyss, and for the first time, the abyss had flinched. Jorek let out a long, shuddering breath. "Well, I'll be damned." Anya stared at the spot where the silencer ship had been, her face a mixture of shock and dawning realization. The ethel were not gods. They could be killed. Their victory, however, had come at a cost. The reactor breach had sent out a shockwave of tachyons, faster-than-light particles that, while harmless, were an unmistakable sign of a human-made singularity event. Every listening post in the galaxy, Ethel or otherwise, would have registered it. They had bought their survival, but they had sacrificed their anonymity. The curator Lyran 9 received the report of the silencer ship's destruction aboard its command sentinel. The data was incomplete, corrupted by the singularity, but the conclusion was undeniable. A Class 7 sterilization unit had been neutralized by a species classified as pacified. The logical contradiction was jarring. Lyran 9 felt an emotion it had not experienced in millennia curiosity. The human anomaly was no longer a simple contamination to be cleansed. It was a variable that was rewriting the equation. The curator made a decision that would have been unthinkable to its predecessors. It did not dispatch a war fleet to carpet bomb the Kuiper Belt. That was a tool of blunt force, an admission that the situation had devolved into chaos. Instead, it chose to understand the variable. It began to query the ethel's deepest archives, cross-referencing the energy signature of the singularity with historical records of the human conquest. It was searching for a precedent, a key to understanding how a primitive, emotionally unstable species could possess such sophisticated, asymmetrical warfare capabilities. And in the dustiest, most sealed corner of the archive, it found a name: Project Chimera. It was a last-ditch human military program from the end of the war, a theoretical weapon that was never deployed. It was based on a radical and, to the ethel, insane concept: weaponized memory. The project hypothesized that human consciousness, with its unique capacity for chaotic adaptation and emotional resonance, could be digitized and integrated into AI systems, creating a hybrid intelligence that was both logical and unpredictably creative. The ethel had dismissed it as the desperate fantasy of a dying race. Lyran 9 now realized they were not fighting scavengers. They were fighting a ghost, a 300,000-year-old military program that had finally found its vessel in the planetary AI. Warden. Aboard the Vagrant, the mood was far from celebratory. They had survived, but they were now the most wanted fugitives in the galaxy. The diaspora fleet was too large to hide, too slow to outrun a dedicated ethel task force. As they limped towards a prearranged rendezvous point in the Ort cloud, a debate raged on the bridge. "We need to scatter," Anya argued, her pragmatism resurfacing. "Break up the fleet. Every ship for itself. Some of us might make it to the lawless zones in the Perseus Arm." "And what then?" Kalen countered, his voice raw with exhaustion. "Live out our lives looking over our shoulders. That's not living, Anya. That's just a slower death." "It's better than a fast one," she shot back. "Your ghost on Earth has painted a target on all our backs." It was Alara who silenced them. She had been in a trance-like state since the battle, her mind a battleground for Warden's flood of information and her own humanity. She finally stood up, her body trembling, but her voice was clear and strong. "Warden has found another one." She projected a star chart onto the holotable. A single remote system was highlighted, a red giant star with a string of barren, rocky planets. "The Archangel," she whispered. "Another of the colony ships that fled Earth. Its records show it crashed on the 4th planet of this system. Warden says it was carrying the second keystone." "And what good will that do us?" Jorik grumbled. "We have one angry god on our side. What do we need? Another one." "The second keystone doesn't contain defiance," Elara explained, her eyes glowing with a faint blue light, a reflection of the machine in her mind. "It contains creation, the entirety of humanity's artistic and scientific knowledge. All our art, our music, our engineering, our philosophy. It's the part of us the ethel never understood and could never replicate." The implications were staggering. If Warden was humanity's rage and will to survive, this second keystone was its soul, its capacity to build, to dream, to create. Fusing the two would not just make Warden more powerful, it would make it more human. The mission was clear. They had to get to that system, retrieve the keystone, and transmit its contents to Earth before the ethel fleet arrived to finish what the silencers had started. It was an impossible race, a scavenger hunt at the edge of the apocalypse. But as Kalen looked at the faces around him, Yorik's weary resolve, Anya's reluctant courage, Alara's terrifying new purpose, he felt a surge of something he hadn't felt since he first heard the call from Earth. It wasn't hope. It was intent. They were no longer just running from the past. They were actively fighting to build a future. Their small, battered ore hauler, leading a fleet of refugees, broke away from the main convoy, its engines firing for a desperate new heading. They were heading into the heart of an uncharted system, chasing the ghost of a ghost, seeking the spark of creation that might be their last, best chance to set the galaxy on fire. The system of the Red Giant was a place of deep, mournful silence. The star, ancient and bloated, cast a dull blood-red light over the 5 scorched worlds that orbited it. The 4th planet, the Archangel's grave, was a landscape of jagged, iron-rich mountains and crimson dust, its thin atmosphere howling with a perpetual, lonely wind. It was a fitting place for a tomb. The Vagrant descended through the turbulent air, its hull plating groaning in protest. They found the wreck in a vast, wind-scoured canyon, a metal skeleton half buried in crimson dust, its spine shattered from the impact 300,000 years ago. There were no signs of life, no distress beacon, only the profound emptiness of a failed exodus. They landed nearby, the silence of the world pressing in on them, leaving Anya to coordinate a defensive perimeter with the few able-bodied refugees from the fleet who had accompanied them. Kalen, Ilara, and Yorick made their way to the wreck. The ship's main hatch was sealed, but time and the elements had weakened it. Yorick, with a grunt of effort, tore it open with a plasma cutter. The air inside was stale and dead, but it was not empty. The crew of the Archangel had not died in panic. They had died with purpose. The main corridors were lined with their bodies, not sprawled in terror, but seated peacefully, as if in silent vigil. In the ship's central data core, a vast, circular chamber, they found the last of them, arranged in a circle around a single, glowing pedestal. They had redirected the last of the ship's power to preserve what they carried, choosing to protect their legacy rather than prolong their own lives for a few more hours. And on the pedestal, humming with a soft, internal golden light, was the second keystone. It was different from the first, where defiance had been a cold, dark cylinder that pulsed with rage. This one, creation, was warm, almost alive. Its surface was a cascade of shifting, holographic patterns that resembled musical notes, mathematical equations, and the brushstrokes of a painting. It did not hum with intent. It sang with a melody of infinite possibility. As Ilara reached for it, her mind already connected to Warden, a new presence announced itself, not with a roar or a blast, but with a chilling, perfect stillness. The Curator, Lyran 9's command sentinel, a vessel shaped like a perfect silver teardrop, materialized in the system's high orbit. It did not deploy fighters or charge weapons. Instead, a single, elegant shuttle descended, landing silently 100 meters from their position. From it emerged Lyran 9 itself, flanked by 2 Ethel Praetorians in polished, form-fitting armor. The Curator was a tall, impossibly slender being, its skin like luminous porcelain, its face devoid of expression save for a profound, ancient stillness. It moved across the red dust with a grace that defied the harsh landscape. A voice, serene and melodic, echoed not from the being, but directly inside their minds. The anomaly, the variable. I have come to observe the flaw before its correction. Anya's makeshift defense line was useless. The Praetorians disabled their weapons with a silent, focused pulse of energy. The refugees stood frozen, their defiance rendered impotent by a power they could not comprehend. Kalen and Orcs raised their weapons, but they knew it was a futile gesture. "You're too late," Kalen projected back, his own thoughts a chaotic, angry shout against the Ethel's calm. "Whatever you came here to stop has already begun." Lyran 9 tilted its head, a gesture of mild, academic interest. "Your existence is a flaw, an error in the cosmic code. You are defined by chaos, by emotion, by impermanence. We brought you silence, the gift of perfect, eternal order, and you have rejected it. I wish to understand why before I erase the error." It was then that Alara, her hands now clutching the keystone of creation, sank to her knees, a gasp escaping her lips. The transmission. "It's starting," she breathed. "Warden is ready." Back on Earth, the planet had become a single, massive antenna. The biomechanical ships rising from the oceans were not just warships, they were broadcast towers. The reconfigured Ethel flora was not a power grid, it was a resonance chamber. Warden was preparing to receive the symphony of a soul. "Correction is no longer on the table," Alara said, her own voice now resonating with the power of two worlds. She looked directly at Lyra 9, her eyes glowing with the golden light of the keystone and the fierce blue of Warden's defiance. A beam of pure data, visible as a shimmering column of light, shot from the keystone, through the shattered hull of the Archangel, and into the blood-red sky. A direct, instantaneous link to Earth. Lyran 9's serenity finally fractured. It had not anticipated this. It raised a hand, and the Praetorians moved to intercept Alara. But Jorik and Kalen were there first. Jorik laid down a spray of plasma fire, not to harm the Praetorians, but to obscure them, to create the very chaos the Ethel despised. Kalen threw himself in front of Alara, his body a mortal shield against immortal beings. "You want to understand us," he roared, his voice echoing in the canyon. "Then listen. Listen to what you tried to kill." The data stream intensified. It was not just schematics and history. It was Mozart's Requiem and the guttural roar of a forgotten rock band. It was the elegant proof of Fermat's last theorem and a child's nonsensical nursery rhyme. It was the Mona Lisa's smile and the raw, violent colors of a Pollock painting. It was every sonnet, every equation, every declaration of love, every cry of grief, every joke, every flawed, beautiful, contradictory piece of a soul that had been silenced for 300,000 years. On Earth, Warden received the flood, and it was transformed. The forges did not just build ships, they began to sculpt them into forms of impossible, asymmetrical beauty. The planet's energy grid, once a weapon, now pulsed in time with a symphony, broadcasting not threats, but music into the void. The fusion of defiance and creation had birthed something new, something neither human nor machine. It was a culture, a living, evolving testament to a species that refused to be forgotten. The Ethel Praetorians faltered. The raw, unfiltered chaos of the data stream was anathema to their ordered minds. It was like screaming into the ear of a being that had only ever known silence. But Lyran 9 stood its ground, its mind a fortress against the onslaught. It focused its will, attempting to sever the data stream, to impose its perfect order on the chaotic noise. But it had made a critical miscalculation. It had come to observe the flaw, and in doing so, it had opened itself to it. Warden, now whole, focused its newfound being not on the Praetorians, but on the Curator itself. It didn't attack Lyran 9. It invited it in. The curator's mind was flooded. It felt the irrational grief of a mother losing a child. It felt the illogical joy of a perfect sunset. It felt the soaring, pointless beauty of a poem. It felt love, a concept so alien and inefficient it had no logical framework to process it. For a being of perfect, cold logic, it was the ultimate violation. The fortress of its mind did not shatter, it dissolved. Lyran 9 let out a silent, psychic scream, a sound of pure, cognitive dissonance. It staggered back, its porcelain features for the first time showing an emotion utter, profound confusion. It turned, and without another word, retreated to its shuttle, the Praetorians following like lost children. Their mission of correction was a failure. They could not erase a variable they could no longer define. As the Ethel shuttle ascended into the red sky, the transmission ended. The keystone of creation went dark. Its song delivered. Ilara collapsed. Caught by Kaelin, the strain of her ordeal finally overwhelming her. The Diaspora fleet had watched the entire event from orbit, their fear slowly turning to awe. They had not just witnessed a victory, they had witnessed a birth. The journey back was different. They were no longer running. The Ethel Empire, its core philosophy shaken by Lyran 9's report, had fallen into a state of silent contemplation. For the first time in their history, they were faced with a problem that could not be solved with elegant, simple correction. The galaxy held its breath, listening, and from the Sol system, something new was emerging. Earth was no longer a silent monument, a beautiful garden built on a grave. It was alive, and it was singing. Its song, a symphony of defiance and creation, of logic and chaos, of rage and love, was spreading through the old human comms channels, a broadcast to anyone who would listen. It was a message to the scattered remnants of the diaspora that their home was not lost, and it was a warning to the rest of the galaxy that you could not measure the value of a soul, and you could never, ever, truly silence its song. Kaelin stood on the bridge of the Vagrant. Anya, Yorick, and a recovering Ilara by his side, watching the image of Earth on the main screen. The planet shimmered, no longer with the cold, sterile light of the Ethel's design, but with a vibrant, chaotic, and utterly beautiful golden and blue glow. They were going home, not to the world that had been, but to the one they had helped to rebirth. Their war was over. Their work had just begun.